The words well-being, anxiety, they're not usually associated with writing. We know that we go through it, but it's not something that's out there.
I think that the more aware we are of our thoughts and being able to manage them, then that will really help with productivity around your research. And of course, it's a lifelong learning process, that is sort of developing that relationship with oneself.
Hello, Dr. Catriona. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on PhD Hard Talk and wanting to have a conversation with myself and to share your expertise and knowledge with the wider audience. Could you please do the introductions in terms of what you do, and then we'll start our discussion.
Okay, thank you, Noma. Well, my name is Dr. Catriona Ryan. I'm an Irish academic. I left full-time academia in 2018. And I started up this company, which is just me, called Scriptor Cube. Before lockdown, I was traveling all around the UK, delivering workshops mainly to PhD researchers in, academic writing, creative thinking and research, and stress reduction techniques and research. But since lockdown, it's all been happening online. If you ask me what's unique about what I do, I guess in relation to the academic writing workshop, that's the most popular one by far. I've developed a new approach to academic writing. It's kind of like applying mindfulness to academic writing. So you could say, well, Catriona, are you talking about meditation between writing sessions? And I'm not dissing that. You could do that too. That's absolutely grand. But what it is actually, breaking down the traditional approach to academic writing. I'll give you an example. Say now you're writing your PhD chapter and, you've got your research done for it and you have a vague idea what the argument is, and then you start writing, So you start sort of writing paragraph per paragraph, trying to build the argument as you go along, trying to sound good at the same time, trying to get all the information down, trying to reference at the same time. So that traditional approach to academic writing is quite stressful. Even, you can see there's a lot of things happening at the same time. Yeah. So what the 7-step process that I've developed does is it breaks that down. And so it kind of turns it on its head. And so doctoral researchers of every research area come to my workshops, and I encourage them to focus on one chapter. And so they basically write their chapter with me using the 7-step method. When I say mindfulness in relation to academic writing, what I'm really talking about is just about breaking everything down to bite-sized manageable chunks. I always do that to sort of
jazz hands,
symbolize it. Yeah, jazz hands. But it's really popular, and I think that's the main one. I mean, the other 2 workshops are popular too, but this one is really especially in the last 2 years, since I've been delivering it online, I've gained a lot more clients, and now internationally as well. I work with universities, and it's definitely something that's very popular and expanding. So that's what I do. I deliver mainly online now to doctoral researchers, and I also deliver workshops to postgraduates as well, in those areas too, but mainly online. And I really love it. It's great. And I'm an independent academic. I love the fact that I'm independent. I'm still affiliated with my former employer, UWTSD, which is great. So I'm publishing. I can apply for funding. So I'm in a lovely situation. And I really enjoy it.
Wow, that sounds impeccable. So in terms of your thought process then, going back to before you started, what pushed you to say, do you know what, postgraduate students, they are struggling and, they need something.
They do.
How did you identify that certain je ne sais quoi that's making you work from home and be self-employed at the moment?
That's a great question. I think from my own experience and from what I learned from so many colleagues around me, that a lot of people had high levels of anxiety, especially when it came to academic writing. And then when I was teaching and became a full-time academic, so many doctoral researchers felt that they needed help with academic writing, but also reducing anxiety associated with it. Because, good to see a lot more programs out there on well-being for doctoral researchers and postgraduates. I did realize I took voluntary redundancy from UWTSD. And I, at that time, just before I'd started there even, because I developed this this method when I was at Swansea University, when I was undertaking my doctoral research. And I realized as it evolved over the years, because it transformed the way I write, that it was having an impact. I realized its potential. And so I took the risk. I took voluntary redundancy, and I took the risk, and I had a strong, it was very interesting, Norma, as well. I'll tell you why it was interesting. Because
getting close, go on.
Yeah. What happened was I really had a very strong intuition about it. I'm not saying I'm psychic, but I really had this really strong, when I will I apply for jobs, will I do this, will I do that, because there was a kind of a month or two I was uncertain about which way I was going to go. So it wasn't immediate, but it was always there. But as time wore on, I just had a very, very strong intuition that I need to do this. And it worked out. It really did. I call them gigs. The first gig I had was at Cardiff University. I delivered a workshop to them this morning. I have a fantastic relationship with them. And then it just, it blossomed. For a long time, when I was delivering face-to-face, I was also handing out feedback forms. Feedback was, on average, very positive. And the percentage, I suppose, increase in confidence in academic writing was between 25 to 30% increase in confidence in academic writing. And that was huge. So as that was, after the first few gigs, I realized, oh God, I've got something here, and this is really helping people. And then, as I said, I was doing a lot of traveling as well, which I wasn't used to, but I loved it. I did love it. I was staying in hotels and in Sheffield. I was going all over the UK to different universities and working with different CDTs as well, and DTP programs. So it was great. And I kind of missed that. I do to a degree. But I also love delivering online. And as I said, since lockdown last year, I gained more clients. And since then, it's been evolving and growing. I'm really, really, really happy. And it seems to be helping a lot of people, which I'm really happy about, because as you and I know, yourself, Norma, you've been to this experience too. And academic writing, writing that thesis, it's, it is, no matter how passionate you are about your research area, it is, we'll always have certain levels of anxiety. But as you know as well, anxiety is fine to a degree, but when it gets to that point where it's interfering with your day-to-day planning, when it's really causing excessive stress, when it's causing excessive writer's block, that you're procrastinating and you're not sleeping, that's when, that's a problem, and that needs to be addressed. So what this method does is that it, by deconstructing that traditional approach to academic writing, it actually builds confidence in academic writing, and hopefully for many people helps to alleviate those experiences, those negative experiences associated with academic writing. But of course, of course, you'll always have a level of anxiety, and that's a good level. You can have a healthy level, but as I said, when it's only when it gets past a certain point, and so that method is about preventing that from happening, I think.
Okay, so in terms of understanding, just from a perspective of how do you define bad anxiety? I know you've said, when it gets to a point whereby you're not sleeping, but from a writing perspective, how do you start to notice that, I'm on level 1 now, this is level 2, okay, this is back up.
Bad anxiety in terms of the research process and academic writing process definitely is when it interferes with your planning around your research. I think it does interfere with critical thinking as well. So I think that, you can be obsessive about a particular part of a chapter and not really kind of think objectively about it, and sort of maybe it's time to move on to something else, and then come back to it. Sort of, I think it can impact decision making around, what do I do today? What do I do in terms of planning and structuring? It can impact on that, and also it can impact. And this is an interesting thing as well. I read somewhere that is it the cerebellum in the brain, at least one of the areas of the brain that regulates stress, but it's also one of the areas that is responsible for information processing. So when you're stressed, that information processing mechanism is disrupted. So hence you get writer's block, and hence it impacts negatively on your critical thinking. Because that's the thing, like you and me and doctoral researchers and academics, we think on a high level.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's very important to be able to manage that well. I'll be honest with you, I have this theory actually called academic dissociation. Okay, I am not a psychologist.
Yes.
I haven't, but I think it's something that a lot of doctoral researchers experience, because I think the key here is when we're focusing on an area of our research or on one of our chapters, and then it's important to be able to transition from that high level to your day-to-day routine, and then to be able to sort of let go of that. And I think a lot of researchers, a lot of very, very bright people find it difficult to transition effectively. So hence they're stuck in this mid space where they're kind of feeling very anxious. And what happens is that because you can't let go, it interferes with critical thinking, your organization, all of those things. And so that's why it's very, very important to be able to, I suppose, engage in positive mind management around your research, around your writing. And I do think that doctoral researchers are particularly vulnerable to that. And I call it academic dissociation. Now, I know this is going to sound a bit woo, but it's true. I think that when we're dissociated slightly, we're stuck up there, we can't really fully come down to the present moment, aware of our environment, aware of our bodies. I think a lot of doctoral researchers are vulnerable to that. And I think that can cause us to end up in a spiral of writer's block, all of those things. So the dissociation, and the only way to counteract it is to try and get back into the present moment. Because when you're stuck in that, you're not fully grounded, you're not fully in the present moment, you're not back in your body. So it's important then to, when you're experiencing that, to try and get back into the present moment, get back into your body, get back into, and undertake some exercises to get yourself back, so you can be clear-headed and go back up there to that space where you can think on a high critical level. So I think it's being able to sort of, because when I start off the academic writing reduced anxiety workshop, I always start off with a story about my own experience of mind management and how it impacted on my productivity around my research, including my writing. And the more you're able to manage your mind well, the more that you'll be able to deal with your anxiety around your research and around your writing. I think that every doctoral researcher needs to take on 2 projects. So one project is your doctoral research and the wonderful, exciting journey that you're about to, intellectual journey that you're about to undertake. But I also believe that every doctoral researcher should undertake a second, more personal project, which is yourself, because I think that your relationship to yourself is vital in terms of your progression through your doctoral program. And when I say your relationship to yourself, you might ask, well, what is that? You know, what characterizes that? I think what characterizes that are the way you think, how you speak to yourself, that your thoughts. Am I too self-critical? Because what happens is when we're too self-critical, we trigger our own writer's block. If we're not able to manage our thoughts positively, we can really be our own worst enemies. And hence, it can cause a lot of problems in terms of productivity around your research. So I think that the more aware we are of our thoughts and being able to manage them, doctoral researchers, then that will really help with productivity around your research. And of course, it's a lifelong learning process, that sort of developing that relationship with oneself. But I think that's to me, I always start off my academic writing, because the academic writing reduced anxiety workshop is actually very practice-based. The whole thing is about writing your chapter. But just for those 2 minutes, I give that talk. And in my other workshop, stress reduction techniques and research, it's the first part of the workshop is all about that. And the techniques and how to sort of bring yourself back to the present moment. It's all based on my own experience, how I problem solve those issues, that kind of thing. So,
wow. There's so much knowledge there. I don't know where to start. But I guess, you know, I'm now thinking, right, I deal with enzymes or atoms.
Fantastic.
It's not really qualitative. How does one follow your approach in that scenario where I have to go into a lab and I have to play with a few things, measure, it doesn't always work out, and I have to do it like 50 times to get it right, and I still don't get it right? How can one take the measurements or the principles that you've got in place and apply them in that setting?
You know what, it's interesting that you say that, because I think since 2018, I must have delivered workshops to thousands of doctoral researchers at this stage. I'd say over 60% of them are science doctoral researchers. I think I would go to the stress reduction techniques workshop. And if you're talking about day-to-day management of mind management, it's about effective planning, and being compassionate with yourself. Because when I said, what is it that's significant in relation to building that resilience? The talk about resilience and well-being, and all those things are great, but what does that actually mean? It's about essentially being compassionate with myself. If things don't go right, to say it's okay, that's okay, don't worry. It's about not being self-critical, the more self-compassionate you are, the more you can build trust in yourself, the more that you'll be able to organize better, the more that it will have a very, very positive impact on your productivity. That's why encouraging that sort of secondary project, which is the relationship with oneself, is so important. Can I tell you a story? Would you like to hear a story?
I love stories as well. I love gossip, by the way, so you can.
This is true now, and it's in Ireland we call it spiel. This is a spiel that I often share with the doctoral researchers. So I remember when I was in the first year of my research, so I was researching an Irish writer called Tom McIntyre. And so I was one of the first people to research him at doctoral level, and there wasn't that much published on him at the time. So I had to spend my first year, before I moved over to the UK. I'm from the Republic of Ireland, so I frequenting Dublin, the National Library in Dublin, to explore his papers and all of that. But I remember the first 2 months into it, I was on my own. I hadn't met my peers over at Swansea University, but I remember a friend called me one day, and it was a really close friend, and they said, "Oh, Catriona, you're doing a PhD. It's fantastic. Really proud of you. And you're going to be like writing a thesis. It's going to be a book." And they did that, a book. And when I saw that gesture, I know my friend was just being kind. They were just trying to be supportive. But God help us, I swear, when I saw them do that, I really felt suddenly, I felt quite anxious. And then the next day, I remember going to the National Library, and I couldn't go in. I was like, "Oh Lord," because I couldn't let go of that book thing, So I felt overwhelmed. So what did I went down to the cafe and had a cup of coffee. And so then another friend of mine who completed her research, her PhD in science, took me for a lovely cup of tea in a lovely cafe called Bewley's, Grafton Street in Dublin. In case anyone hasn't been to Dublin, Bewley's and Grafton Street is recommended. It's over 100 years old. It's a lovely cafe. But they sat me down, and it was a bit of genius what my friend said. She said, "Catriona, you're scaring yourself." And she said, "Look, I'm going to sort of break this down for you." And what she did was genius. She said, a generic thesis, she said, regardless of what research area it is, let's look, it has a basic generic structure. So by the time you start writing, you said, after you identify your gap, you'll have a fair idea what your gap is basically by the time you start writing. So let's look at a generic structure of a thesis, she said. So you have the introduction, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, and then you have the conclusion. Now she said, let's take away the conclusion, or the introduction and the conclusion, and let's look at the mid-chapters. And then she said, let's take away all the mid-chapters bar one. Let's look at one mid-chapter. And she said, right, now, what is one chapter of a thesis? And I went, well, she said, it's got one paragraph of an introduction, a series of paragraphs, and a conclusion. And then she said, it's got its own little argument, because each chapter has its own it represents a different perspective on the gap that you identified. And she said, and it's got a series of themes, it's got its own argument, it's got one paragraph introduction, one paragraph conclusion. Now she said, what does that sound like to you? And I said, do you know what? I said, I think that sounds like a dissertation or an essay. She said, yeah. She said, Catriona, so she put the genius of what she said was, she said, you're writing one essay at a time. So what happened was I was scaring myself about the thesis as being this big thing. But then my very clever friend broke it down. This is mindfulness and academic writing, around academic writing, broke it down to bite-sized manageable chunks and said, listen, you're writing one essay at a time. Of course, there's overlap and everything, but essentially you're writing one essay at a time. Suddenly this huge weight went off my shoulders. And I remember after that meeting, because at that stage, I was reading some self-help books, like who hasn't read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle? And I think The Road Less Traveled, Scott Peck is a bit dated now, but I was kind of into that. Yeah, absolutely. But I remember thinking to myself, really sort of doing a real deep self-reflection about what was going on. And I remember thinking to myself, do you know what? I was really scaring myself with my own thoughts. And I realized, oh my God, I was triggering my own writer's block because I wasn't managing my thoughts well. And I realized, and I made a promise to myself, I am going to focus on 2 projects here. One is the thesis, obviously, and the excitement of that. But the second project is more personal, is my relationship with myself. How do I speak to myself? How do I, and I worked on really developing that for myself, not for any, at the time, it was honestly, and as I was saying to you, I found a lot of ways of doing that. And it basically, how to counteract negative thinking, how to sort of effectively transition from up there to down here, to be in the present moment so you can let go, do everyday, day-to-day things, how to avoid procrastination because of anxiety, because in each of those things, you're not grounded, you're not in the present moment. So it's about letting go of that. And I found the more I was able to do that, the more I was able to trust myself. But essentially though, at the basis of everything, honestly, for any doctoral researcher, is being able to work on yourself, being able to manage your anxiety. And the first part of my workshop, stress reduction techniques, is all about those techniques and how to manage that anxiety, how to come back to the present moment in order to be productive around your productivity, around your research. But also the second part then is about looking at anxiety reducing approaches then within the research process, such as planning, approaching theory, how to read a paper, how note-taking, all of those things. Most of it is really based on my own experience. And I'll be honest with you, if I hadn't discovered that, I don't know if I probably would have had a couple of extensions of my research otherwise, honestly. And it made me realize too that, I was on my own for that first year. Then when I moved over to the UK, over here in Wales, and I met some lovely friends at Swansea University, and I realized the importance of a community for PhD researchers. It's important because you are on your own, but building that community is so important. And that's why part of what you do, Norma, is so good, because it's giving a voice to people who are working with doctoral researchers or doctoral researchers. A sense of community is important, connectedness, because also building that relationship, part of that resilience is also building that relationship with others.
Wow, again, so much stuff. But I have to ask, in terms of, the words well-being, anxiety, they're not usually associated with writing per se. It's not something that's commercially shared. We know that we go through it, but it's not something that's out there, that technique in terms of how we can do better. For example, I've had colleagues who've said, well, I was taught to write, it's a research level. What is a research level? They have no idea. And I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how does one come to a point where they can be honest with themselves and say, the issue is me, as you've explained. I don't have a relationship with myself, and therefore I create my own writer's block, and then I create this barrier where I think, I call it imposter syndrome, and I joke about it, but the reality is I'm just lying on imposter syndrome right now. The reality is, I haven't taken time to learn and to find out, how I write and how I think, because you go through academia sometimes and you haven't had the opportunity, just based on conversations that I've had on PhD Hard Talk. Some of my colleagues have expressed that, I moved along, I didn't take a break, so I didn't reflect, and I've just been going like a hamster. What's your guidance to somebody who's going through that journey or who's currently going through it?
Absolutely. I thank you. That's a great question. I think that's, I totally understand that, because I remember I had a big gap between my master's and my PhD. God, it was about 6 years, 8 years ago. I did my master's at Cork University, and
Cork is beautiful, by the way, if anybody wants.
Cork is beautiful, absolutely, especially West Cork is lovely. And but yeah, I know it's a grand place, and people are so friendly down there as well. I think I found that I had imposter syndrome big time when I started to, because I was worried about the writing. What level am I at? Because it's you know, there is a significant difference between a master's and a doctorate, very significant difference. And the prospect of being published and having to write, you know, you're encouraged in your first year to, you know, apply for conferences as well. So there's a lot happening. And it's no wonder people are worried about, you know, and my experience of it was, yeah, I was really worried about, you know, what level am I at, you know, with my writing. You know, I've been out of this for a few years, you know, and I didn't know. So I think I found that for myself, I think it's very important to start writing early. I think it's important, even if you're note taking, you know, the early stage. I mean, the first thing you'll do in your first year, I think, for most doctoral researchers, I think, I suppose it's science. Some science researchers, you're in the lab maybe for the first year, but even then you're writing reports. You're doing some sort of writing. For most doctoral researchers, you will be encouraged to do early stage literature review, and the more I think that you write. To sort of help with that, sort of, it's kind of like, I think, you know, when you're trying to find that gap and you're kind of taking notes, I think that's a very important process in terms of building confidence around writing, around your understanding. I think the writing naturally comes once you understand where you're going with your research, and I think they say that the more you read in academic journals, that will inform the way you write. That's true. But I think there's another level to that. I think, and what I say to people is, the way I always developed my voice as an academic writer is to create a personal dictionary. So this is, have you ever had the experience when you read a sort of an academic journal article and you come across a word that really gives you a buzz? And I know that sounds a bit strange, but when you come across a word,
I do that.
yeah,
I'm like, wow, that's a big
yeah,
word. I've never
yeah,
heard it. What does it mean?
what does it mean exactly? What does it mean? Well,
Can I
sometimes,
use it?
yeah, exactly, because it's something about the sound of the word, and it doesn't matter what research area you're involved in, because people will say to me, yeah, but you're literature, so you, but no, I often find that science writers can be better than writers than people from humanities. My point is that when you come across language that gives you a buzz that you really, really like, that gives you a kind of, I can't explain it. One of the things that characterizes one academic writer from another is the language they use, how they structure their sentences, words they use. And I found that for me, I collated a lot of those words into a personal dictionary. And not only did I collate them into the dictionary, I explore them a little bit more. I used to go onto a thesaurus and sort of explore the antonyms and the synonyms, and I included that as well into the dictionary. So I found that when I worked with, as I was reading, just because, you know, in your first year, you're reading so much, I would always capture those kind of words. And the more that you do that, and then you start using those words in your note taking, and then maybe your first literature review, that will build, because you've got an emotional connection with those words. Those words, somehow, for some reason, they stay in your memory bank, and those words are kind of part of you in a way, and you're building your self-trust as a writer as a result. The more that you build that will build your confidence as a writer, and I think that's the way to go. I think because that was my experience, and it's a lifelong process doing that. Because as a doctoral researcher, you're also an academic writer, and it's about believing that. And the more you kind of develop that relationship with language, and the feeling about language and the emotion connected to it, and capturing those words, the more that you build. Actually, that's part of the building that relationship with yourself too, in a way as well. You're building self-trust. You're saying to yourself, "Wow, I love that. I'm going to use that now in the sentence." And there's something, and it really helps motivation as well when it comes to writing the whatever it is that you're writing, the early stage literature review. Or so I think that for me, you know, that's probably a long roundabout way of answering what you were asking, but I think it's very important to write as much as possible, even if it's only when you're note taking, you know, to summarize what people are saying, and then when you make the connections, you know, to sort of write rough notes, and then, you know, but try and also incorporate, as I said, at the same time, words that you really enjoy, that you feel connected to, collate them in a personal dictionary and incorporate them in your note taking, and build. And that will build confidence of writing at the early stage.
I've never thought of that. And I love words. I love finding out, you know, in terms of what's the Greek meaning for the word, you know, the Latin, where the borrowed word, and I get really
fantastic.
excited.
That's lovely, yeah.
But I've never thought of actually sitting down and creating my own word bank in a sense. And
absolutely.
has just, wow, I'm going to try that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. That's the thing. It's unbelievable how imposter syndrome can really have a negative impact. I've known so many people who went through the doctorate but didn't believe that they would publish, and so because of their lack of self-belief, and they may have done so well in their research, and they got great reviews from their external examiners, and they, you know, due to lack of confidence or for whatever reason, they just go off and do something else. The more you build that confidence with language as an academic writer, this is all well-being too, you know, it's all emotionally connected. And I think that can have a really positive impact on your decision-making after you finish your doctorate, you know.
No, that is amazing, honestly. And I understand what you're saying, because if you can get to a point where you are confident and comfortable with what you articulate, you know, in terms of scribing wise, there is no barrier.
No.
You're just confident. It's like Usain Bolt when he's running, like you just go.
It's true. And the other thing as well is important, and I remember someone saying this to us actually years ago, when we're doctoral researchers, never compare yourself to anyone. Everyone is different. Don't think, if you think somebody's better than you or they're better than me, something happens inside. You put yourself down, that kills motivation. Never, you're unique, you're different. Everyone is in their own space. And it's about self-belief. Self-belief is everything. Self-belief for doctoral researcher is everything for success. If you believe in yourself, you can do anything. You can publish with Oxford University Press. You can do anything. And that's why it's important to be able to build that relationship with yourself as you're on this exciting intellectual journey. It's everything. And that's how you build. And as I said, building resilience. The heart of it is, as well as, you know, managing your mind well, your thought processes, all the positive activities that you do to help bring yourself back into the present moment, by the way, are acts of self-compassion. Taking a break is an act of self-compassion. Saying to yourself, okay, I didn't make the deadline for that, but I'll just reschedule. That's an act of self-compassion. Rather than saying, silly, stupid girl, why didn't you, you know, or calling yourself a silly woman, or damn it, you know, and then using harsh, you know, it's the way we speak to ourselves. And of course, it's not just that, it's also it's important to build not just relationship with yourself, but build positive and also nurturing relationships with others around you in your department. And hopefully you will have that with your supervisor too. So as I said, the more that you build that relationship with yourself, build that resilience, you can deal with anything. Anything is possible. I know that sounds a bit like woo, but it's not. Honestly, you know, I do believe that is my experience, and I do believe positive self-thinking is everything. It is.
Yeah, no, I mean, that sounds amazing. I mean, I've seen on Twitter whereby, you know, there's all these memes to say you have reviewer 1 and then you've got reviewer 2. Reviewer 2 usually says something really harsh.
Norma, it's very interesting you say that, you know. I know this, and you see funny cartoons, PhD comics, you know, about and sometimes seeing those, they are funny, and it's a way for people to sort of, you know, using hyperbole, or maybe sometimes not, to express their experience, to show their experiences. But I think, but there is a negative side to that too. I think, because it is funny and it's good that it's out there, but it's important though, you can't, what's important to remember is, especially in COVID, you can't control what's out there. So you have your immediate sphere of influence, which is your internal world and the world around, you know, your immediate world around you. That's what you can control. And I guess it's about creating value for yourself and those around you too, I suppose, in many ways. Now, I'm getting a bit Buddhist here, saying that, but essentially though, hey, it really is. You know, you can have your plans for like the next 2 years, that's fine. But when you're in the present moment and you're not thinking about tomorrow, and I'm going to quote Jesus. Jesus did say, you know, let tomorrow take care of itself. Just think about today. But when you're in the present moment, you know, it's lovely. You know, you're just maybe working on something, because sometimes for doctoral researchers, it's difficult to be in the present moment. And it's about trying to find a balance in terms of, and I guess that's the other thing too, isn't it? That I discovered is, what is your relationship with yourself? It's your relationship with your thoughts, how you speak to yourself, but it's also your relationship with space and time. Right. You know, your space around you. Are you nurturing your space? Are you making sure when you get that sleep that you have it? There's so much research out there about sleep, making sure that you're getting that deep, deep sleep that will help with concentration and your productivity. So to enable that sleep in the dark, make sure that there's no noise, and have a nice bath, be nurturing to yourself. Then that your space around you is tidy. If you have chaos in your office, that will have a negative impact on your productivity. It'll bring it down on some level. Also, your experience of time. Because sometimes when we procrastinate and we just dissociate into the phone, or we kind of, time flies, and we're actually out of sync with time as well. And so it's important when you're in the present moment, you're very aware of time. And so your experience of time and your awareness of the space around you, which is also rooted in your experience of your body, that is also very much part of mindfulness around your research as a doctoral researcher, which will help. The more you can develop awareness around that, and all the positive things you do for yourself. When I say acts of self-compassion, as I said earlier, it's not just you looking in the mirror saying, I love you to yourself. And that's great though. You know what? That does work to a degree, it is. But it's about the practical everyday, you're taking breaks, you're doing good things for yourself. You're saying, okay, I missed a deadline, that's okay. And being compassionate and understanding, not beating yourself up. And so when you're in the lab, so if an experiment doesn't work out, it's okay to start again, find out, take breaks. And again, your experience of time and space, it very much applies to the lab as well. Moment to moment, we are experiencing space and time. And as a doctoral researcher, very much that applies. And it's about developing awareness around that, particularly around you, whether it's in the lab the more that you can do that, and the more that essentially that your thinking, your self talk is positive and nurturing yourself, parenting yourself, being kind to yourself, then you'll find that you'll relax more, that you'll be able to think more clearly on a high level. And, because what I said about the cerebellum, that when you are stressed, the information processing mechanism in the cerebellum gets interrupted. So it's hard to think up there, the beautiful, brilliant mind that PhDs have. You can't and it will be impacted. So then frustration will come in and things can spiral. So it's about being able to bring yourself back, and self-trust, resilience, all of that is so important. Experiencing a successful journey around the PhD, within the PhD, and also beyond the PhD as well.
We need that beyond. So in terms of advice then, for somebody who's thought of something, not the same as yours, something that they think would be really beneficial in terms of academia or outside in industry, and they want to embark on a similar journey as you, what advice would you give them?
Now, I have an idea here. I was talking to somebody about this recently. I did deliver a workshop face-to-face to doctoral research group, a doctoral training partnership at Durham 2 years ago, and I delivered a networking workshop, and I brought in something in relation to the entrepreneurial mindset. Again, this is based on my own experience. Basically, I think as a doctoral researcher, if you have time, it's about exploring the potential of what you're doing and how you can sort of use it externally, number one. But also, there are traditional ways of applying. You want to be an academic, that's fine. It is, and I know that maybe some people might be thinking of non-academic options as well, but it's important to start where your heart is, where you feel that something could work. It's probably quite vague the way I said that, but my experience was, I found that when I finished my doctorate, I developed, actually the year before my doctorate, I started working in other universities. I realized that what I had was useful to art departments. I think art departments are an amazing resource for people for most research areas. They're always looking for people to sort of deliver a lecture on science or sociology or, anything. And art departments, I think there should be an art department in every university, because they would inspire interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary thinking. But I honestly believe I started working in the art department the year before, just the odd gig now and then, just the year before I finished my doctorate. And then afterwards, I decided to set up a small business called Ryan Consultancy. And I started delivering my poetry workshop. I also have a poetry workshop. I'm a poet as well, and which I originally developed for other writers, but now I deliver it to PhDs as well, and postgraduates. But basically, my point is that I think that a very good way to get noticed is to develop is actually to set up a business. Just after you finish, think about what you'd like to do, set up that business. But setting up that business is a very good way to get noticed. Try and get your foot into a couple of different universities. Online, there's a lot more happening now, so maybe you don't physically have to go there, but it's a very good way to possibly be getting a full-time academic post, which is what happened to me. I was delivering workshops to different universities as Ryan consultancy. I wasn't Scriptor Cube at that time, and I wasn't. It was in a slightly different context, and because of that, I ended up getting a full-time post at UWTSD. And so, as I said, is one thing I would consider is thinking about self-employment as a way. You can think about it to yourself in two ways. Set up a business for myself with a project that I think really works, but you're keeping your options open. Hopefully you may be thinking, yeah, this business could really work out, which would be great, or other options may arrive. You may be offered a full-time post at a university or at a company, but it's about keeping your options open. So when people say to you, about, and I told you a story about, I was at some conference somewhere years ago, and this person from a company said to everyone, well, only 2% of you will become academics, and you could feel the room, the energy in the room just drop. No, forget that. You need to just focus. This is why building that relationship with self is so important. Sometimes people sort of think too much outside of what's going on and not what's going on inside enough. Because when you focus on what's going on in yourself, you will find ways and means. If you want to get to a particular place in the world, you will do it. And a very good way is to be flexible and open. And a very good way to do that is to set up your own business. So you might have a foot at a couple of universities, in a couple of companies, you're bopping around the place, you're opening yourself up to a variety of perspectives at the same time. And I think that's a way to think, that's an approach to take while you're looking for full-time jobs, maybe at a university or at a company. So don't just say, oh, I've heard so many doctoral researchers in the past telling me, oh, look, I'm just going to get a job somewhere because I'm not going to get an academic job. And they lose confidence, but don't. It's about self-belief. Self-belief is everything. Honest to God, it is absolutely everything. If you believe in yourself, you can do anything. And the internet has done so much for the entrepreneurial mindset. I think every doctoral researcher needs to develop the entrepreneurial mindset. And as I said, this, again, based on my own experience, try and make connections with a couple of universities, especially art departments. There's something about an art department. I think, and as I said, I think there should be an art department in every university. The next industrial revolution will be, the human contribution will be creative. And I think every university should incorporate an art department to encourage interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary thinking. So I'm going off point there a little bit, but what I'm trying to say is, yeah, I think every doctoral researcher, the more you build that self-resilience, self-belief, the more creative your mind will get. And the more you'll believe in yourself that you can do this, that, and the other. Part and parcel of that is developing an entrepreneurial mindset, no matter what research area you're involved in.
No, that is amazing. So in terms of the final question then, what made you come on PhD Hard Talk?
I kind of was following some of what you were doing, and I thought, wow, that is something that that is very, very interesting, that's needed, because there needs to be a platform that encourages, that really sort of highlights the experience of doctoral researchers, not only for those working with them, but also doctoral researchers themselves. And I know you go to different universities with this fantastic model that you have. And coincidentally, I think you contacted me as well.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it, because there's so many. I was so happy that you did. I think what you do is amazing, and I really wanted to be part of it, because I think it's very innovative what you're doing. I think it's amazing. It's got amazing potential, and I think it's something that can really benefit the PhD community, but not and within the UK. But I'm sure you can probably take it to other universities in abroad, in the States, other places too, and as I said, it's a fantastic model that you developed, Norma. So it's amazing. And as I said, you know, when you have, and you're in control of what you're doing, and I'm in control of what I'm doing, and that's lovely as well. It's nice to be an independent. We're both independent academics, and it is great. I now work with nearly 35 universities in the UK, maybe 10, 12 doctoral training partnerships, and also centres for doctoral training.
Wow.
And now I work with 2 American universities, so the University of New Hampshire. And then now on Thursday, I'm delivering a workshop to the University of Tennessee in Knoxville for the first time to, social work department there. I delivered a workshop to the University of Groningen in Netherlands a few weeks ago. And Galway University, they were part of, it was a Horizon 2020 program. It's expanding, and I really love this. And I think that's what's amazing too. When you are doing something that you love, and look at you, Norma, you love what you're doing. It's everything, isn't it? Yeah, but it's everything, and what you're doing is incredible, and it's going to. I think it will go international. I think it's got amazing potential.
Yeah, so. Thank you. No, I don't know how to react. I'll say thank you, and then I'll scream off camera after. Like,
thank you.
Any parting words for anybody that's in academia or outside of academia wanting to come into academia?
Fundamental is build your relationship with yourself. Because when they talk about resilience and all those things, which is great, that's what it is. Self-compassion. That's what's going to really enhance your experience of the PhD journey and your decision making about what you want to do afterwards. To people who want to come in to do a doctorate, I think doing a doctorate is a wonderful. I think most people can do doctorates. I do. It's just about self-belief. But the thing that you need to know is when you decide to do a doctorate, that it's something that you're passionate about, that it's something that it comes from your heart. When you find a topic that you feel really is from there, then that's half the battle, really. Go for it, you know. My PhD, I learned a lot about my research area, of course, but I also learned a lot about myself. Yeah. So much about myself, my goodness, so much about myself. And that's why I'm grateful for it. Yeah. So, and I'm so glad you flagged up, Norma, about those memes on yeah, and I know the memes are funny about the PhD journey, but it's also a very beautiful experience. And I know it's difficult because I know we're in the COVID process, we're in the difficult times right now. But still, you can, you know, it's about focusing on, you know, you can't control what's happening outside. It's about focusing on, you know, your own inner world and the immediate world around you, which is your research and your engagement with that. And it's a beautiful engagement. And you're very privileged to do it. Very few people in the world get to do doctorates, and you're doing it because you're brilliant, and you need to know that you're brilliant, and you're a writer, you're an academic writer, and believe that you are. And the more that you can build that belief and self-resilience through awareness about how you speak to yourself, anything is possible. Wow.
I have nothing to say but to say we'll cut that off and share that over and over again, because those wise words, they will stick with me. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I feel I'm so chuffed, and it's incredible. And honestly, I really wish you well on this fantastic journey that you're on with this PhD Hard Talk. It's a fantastic idea.
Thank you very much.